First Samuel 30 through 31. David and his men arrived in Ziklag on the third day. The Amalekites had raided the Negev and attacked and burned Ziklag. They also had kidnapped the women and everyone in it, from youngest to oldest. They had killed no one, but had carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men arrived at the town, they found it burned. Their wives, sons, and daughters had been kidnapped. David and the troops with him wept loudly until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelite and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had also been kidnapped. David was in an extremely difficult position because the troops talked about stoning him, for they were all very bitter over the loss of their sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. David said to the priest Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it to him. And David asked the Lord, "Should I pursue these raiders? Will I overtake them?" The Lord replied to him, "Pursue them, for you will certainly overtake them and rescue the people." So David and the 600 men with him went. They came to the Wadi Besor, where some stayed behind. David and 400 of the men continued the pursuit, while 200 stopped because they were too exhausted to cross the Wadi Besor. David's men found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. Then they gave him some pressed figs and 2 clusters of raisins. After he ate, he revived, for he hadn't eaten food or drank water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, Who do you belong to? Then David said to him, "Who do you belong to? Where are you from?" "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite man," he said. "My master abandoned me when I got sick 3 days ago. We raided the south country of the Cherethites, the territory of Judah, and the south country of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag." David then asked him, "Will you lead me to these raiders?" He said, "Swear to me by God that you won't kill me or turn me over to my master, and I will lead you to them." So he led him. And there were the Amalekites spread out over the entire area, eating, drinking, and celebrating because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and the land of Judah. David slaughtered them from twilight until the evening of the next day. None of them escaped except 400 young men who got on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken. He also rescued his 2 wives. Nothing of theirs was missing, from the youngest to the oldest, including the sons and daughters, and all the plunder the Amalekites had taken. David got everything back. He took all the flocks, herds, which were driven ahead of the other livestock, and the people shouted, "This is David's plunder." When David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to go with him and had been left at the Wadi Besor, they came out to meet him and to meet the troops with him. When David approached the men, he greeted them, but all the corrupt and worthless men among those who had gone with David argued because they didn't go with us. We will not give any of the plunder we recovered to them, except for each man's wife and children. They may take them and go. As if these men did something to earn it themselves, out of their own strength. They did not. God fought the battle for them, and God won that battle. God gave their stuff back to them. But David said, "My brothers, you must not do this with what the Lord has given us. He protected us and handed over to us the raiders who came against us. Who can agree to your proposal? The share of the one who goes into battle is to be the same as the share of the one who remains with the supplies. They will share equally." Hold on, I gotta go back to about 21. When David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to go with him and had been left at the Wadi Besor, they came out to meet him. They were too weak to cross the wadi because of the fact that they were too busy crying about everything that they lost. They were looking at the distraction. A lot of times Satan will bring a little battle, a little distraction, a little storm to distract your eyes off of God, to wear you out, so that when the real battle comes, you're not strong enough to stand up and fight. You're not strong enough to cross the wadi, just like these men weren't, because they were too busy crying and worrying all those days, and they weren't in rest. But what did David do? David went straight to the Lord and took his advice and asked God, Lord, should I chase after these men? And God told him, yes, chase after them. And I'm going to give you everything they took from you. When David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to go with him and had been left at the Wadi Besor, they came out to meet him and to meet the troops with him. When David approached the men, he greeted them. But all the corrupt and worthless men among those, notice what it says. It calls these men corrupt and worthless men among those who had gone with David argued. Now, why are they corrupt and worthless? Because they have pride in themselves. They have self-righteousness in themselves. They are of no use, because as long as somebody holds on to pride and self-righteousness, it is all about them. They have not died to themselves, but they continue to live and strive for what's best for them. So what did these men do? They argued. Hold on. But all the corrupt and worthless men among those who had gone with David argued, because they didn't go with us, we will not give any of the plunder we recovered to them, except for each man's wife and children. They may take them and go. Now, why were these men thinking that? Because they didn't go with us. They didn't earn it, as if they themselves did earn it, when the Lord gave that to them. That was the Lord's battle, and the Lord's the one that handed them over to them, just like David's going to tell them as we go on, just like we read earlier. They may take them and go. But David said, my brothers, you must not do this with what the Lord has given us. He protected us and handed over to us the raiders who came against us. Who can agree to your proposal? The share of the one who goes into battle is to be the same as the share of the one who remains with the supplies. They will share equally. Why? Because they didn't do anything to earn it themselves. And it has been so. From that day forward, David established this policy as a law and an ordinance for Israel, and it still continues today. When David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, here is a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. He sent gifts to those in Bethel, in Ramoth of the Negev, and in Jatir, to those in Aroer, in Siphmoth, and in Eshtemoa, to those in Rakau, in the towns of the Jerahmeelites, and in the towns of the Kenites, to those in Hormah, in Borashan, and in Athak, to those in Hebron, and to those in all the places where David and his men had roamed. The Philistines fought against Israel, and Israel's men fled from them and were killed on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pursued Saul and his sons and killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. When the battle intensified against Saul, the archers found him and severely wounded him. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, draw your sword and run me through with it, or these uncircumcised men will come and run me through and torture me. But his armor-bearer would not do it because he was terrified. Then Saul took his sword and fell on it. Saul fell on his own sword. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his own sword and died with him. So on that day, Saul died together with his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men. So he died that same day with his 3 sons, just like the Lord had told him through the supposed Saul the night before, through that medium. When the men of Israel on the other side of the valley and on the other side of the Jordan saw that Israel's men had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and fled. So the Philistines came and settled in them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons dead on Mount Gilboa. They cut off Saul's head, stripped off his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to spread the good news in the temples of their idols and among the people. Then they put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and hung his body on the wall of Bethshan. When the residents of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their brave men set out, journeyed all night, and retrieved the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. When they arrived at Jabesh, they burned the bodies there. Afterward, they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days.